Today, we're going to tackle a question that honestly feels a bit like a magic trick. It's something that's right at the heart of pretty much all modern research, polling, and science. I mean, it sounds impossible, right? How can a tiny, tiny slice of the population accurately tell you about the whole pie? Well, it's not magic. It's a really powerful statistical method called sampling. And today, we're going to break down exactly how it all works. Okay, so let's get into it. Before we even touch the how, we've got to understand the why. Why don't researchers just ask everyone? The simple answer, it's pretty much an impossible task. You might think sampling is just, a compromise, a shortcut, but get this, it's often better than trying to study everyone. Yeah, sure, it costs less and it takes way less time, but because you're focusing all your resources on a smaller group, you can often collect more accurate, higher quality data. And let's be real, sometimes trying to survey an entire country, studying the whole population is just not going to happen. So, if we can't study everybody, how in the world do we pick the right few? We can think of the whole process like a funnel, starting out really wide and then getting narrower and narrower until we have our final group for the study. And this image right here illustrates that journey perfectly. We start with this huge theoretical population, let's say an entire country. Then we narrow it down to the population we can actually get our hands on. We create a list to pick from, and finally, we select the actual people who will be in our study. So let's look at each of those steps. At the very top of our funnel, the widest part is the target population. This is the big group you're interested in. If your research question is, what do university students in this country think? Then your target population is every single one of those students. It's your ideal group. But you can't just magically contact every student in the nation. So the next step is to create a sampling frame. This is a real, actual list of the people you can draw from, like a university's official student list or a directory of all registered voters. It's the practical, real-world version of your target population. All right, so once you have your list, your sampling frame, you get to this really critical fork in the road. You have to make a choice between two completely different philosophies for how you're going to pick people from that list. So, on one side, you have probability sampling. This is where every single person on your list has a known, real chance of being picked. It's random, it's scientific. On the other side, you've got non-probability sampling, which is usually based on what's convenient. It's often cheaper and easier, but, and this is a huge but, you can't confidently say your findings apply to the whole population. Let's explore both of these paths. First up, let's take that random route. This is the gold standard when you want your sample to basically be a perfect miniature version of your total population. So the most important word here is randomness. By giving everyone an equal or at least a known chance of being picked, you wash out any potential biases. It's just like a perfectly fair lottery where every single ticket has a shot at winning. And that fairness, that's what lets you make statistical claims about the entire group. Now, researchers have a whole toolkit to make this randomness happen. The simplest is basically like drawing names out of a hat. But then there are more complex methods, like stratified sampling, which makes sure you get proportional representation from different subgroups, making sure your sample has the right mix of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. Each tool is for a different situation, but they all share that same core principle of fairness and randomness. But what if a fair lottery just isn't possible? What if you don't have a perfect list of everybody, or you're short on time and money? Well, that brings us to the practical path, non-probability sampling. Here, the core idea is that selection is totally deliberate, not random at all. Researchers might pick people just because they're easy to access, like a professor surveying students in their own class, or because they believe certain people are really good representatives of the group they want to study. This approach also has its own set of techniques. A convenience sample is, it's exactly what it sounds like. A quota sample tries to build a representative group, but without the randomness. And then there's this one particularly interesting method called consecutive sampling. Consecutive sampling is often seen as the strongest of these non-random methods. And the idea is actually pretty simple. For a set period of time, you include every single person who comes along that meets your criteria. Think of a clinic, including every patient with a specific condition who walks through their doors in the month of March. And this diagram here shows exactly how it works. You're not picking and choosing from the people available. For that set time period, you take all of them as they show up. This really minimizes the researcher's own selection bias, which is why it's considered the non-random technique that gets closest to the power of a true random sample. So after going down these two different paths, we come to the big takeaway. This isn't about one method being good and the other being bad. It's about a fundamental dilemma that every single researcher has to face. And this quote really hits the nail on the head. The choice isn't between good and bad sampling, it's about picking the right tool for the job. If a researcher absolutely needs results that they can generalize to an entire country with statistical confidence, they have to use probability sampling. But if they're just exploring a new idea or they have limited resources, then a non-probability method might actually be the more practical and smarter choice. And that leaves us with a final question for you. Now that you understand this fork in the road, the next time you see a headline about a new poll or a groundbreaking study, what's the first and most important question you should ask about how they picked their participants? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.